the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as AlexRenew. Did I get it right? I did. Members of the board, take a look at the agenda. We have a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Mr. Beal, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hammer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nope. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
No.
Okay, let's move right to the consent agenda. And remember, two things in concert here, the meeting minutes of the December meeting and the slight changes to the policy for procurement of construction management and design build. A minute to consider that. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? I don't want to rush anybody.
So moved.
Second. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, moving right into updates, community meetings. Suspect every community, civic association in town is worried about the arena. And not a whole lot of discussion on AlexRenew items. We had different experience. Delray Civic Association's been very busy, I know that. Same with Rosemont.
Well, you were there to give some sewer-related context to the arena construction, which was very helpful, I thought.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the pump station.
People didn't know about the pump station. So we're happy to hear about that. Very upset over traffic, but content with the sewer treatment. Finance and Audit Committee.
Nothing to report except February kickoff. And we'll have a budget to start talking about and rates to start talking.
So we move into the busy season. Okay, governance. Okay.
We don't have any updates. Mr. Jinks and I need to discuss the two policy updates.
Okay, racing right into recap from the board retreat. I have to say it was probably the best board retreat we've ever had, both in terms of productivity and collaboration and just general fun, and also the output. And Sharam, you were not there, so you had to take a strengths test. So the table tents you see, these are our strengths. And the orange strengths are highly praised. And I have none. But the real outcome of the meeting, and I think one that surprised me, how quickly we converged on a really nice statement of vision, mission, and goals, is this document. And I have to say, the quality of this and how precise it is and how succinct it is and how inspiring it is a real testament to how the board came together and how well facilitated we were. Any changes to this?
Governance did not have any. Mr. Jinks, Ms. Caldarelli, did you have anything you wanted to add or edit?
No, I thought we did a really good job with it, what we finally landed on.
We thought it was a very good, succinct statement, very meaningful.
So we have 2060 vision.
Yes.
Okay, good. I think we should take a motion to accept this statement of vision, mission, and goals as a testament of the board.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Hammer, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So, Mr. Carl, does this go up on the web?
Yeah, yes, we can. So I think the next step is we're going to circle back at the February board meeting and bring some strategies to the board, show you how the strategic goals will be implemented. So we're going to put strategies to each that help set for the organization moving forward. Those will be reflected in the various documents that come to the board. For example, the budget would be one of them.
Great. Now, we have a meeting with the council work group coming up soon.
24th.
Could we include this in the handouts? And I'll talk to it. I think this is a beautiful statement of where we're headed. Great. Now we're going to talk about winter average.
All right, we got to this a month early, so that gives us the ability between now and February 12th, when we meet for finance and audit, to reflect on it, think about it, have discussions, email back and forth if we need to, about, well, what, if anything, we want to do with the winter quarter average. One thing to mention, on the 12th at finance and audit, we're also going to be doing a rate review. Terry and Diana are going to take a deep dive into our rate model, since we do have a relatively new board, to get everybody up to speed, so we all understand how the rate setting process works and really what are the gears behind the scene that are turning. So tonight, we're just going to quickly go through what the current policy is for winter average, look at some data that helps inform potential changes to our policy, discuss some options, are all in one slide, and then discuss next steps. So just a quick background, we did some digging around 2014, 2015, when the billing changed from quarterly to monthly. AlexRenew went to implementing a winter average. It only applies to single family residential homes. It does not apply to commercial accounts. That's pretty much standard across the industry. These are really geared towards residential homes. The whole reason was to ensure that we're only billing for flow that enters the wastewater system. So flow that runs off and enters the storm system, we're not counting for irrigation or other flows that are leaving on property. Really just we're concerned about sanitary flow. So it was a fairness. When it was introduced, it was done around fairness. And what it does, the easiest way to explain our current policy is we really have two caps. The winter quarter period is December, January, and February of each year. And that period sets your winter quarter average, your average use across that time. If your winter quarter average is less than 4,000 gallons, then your cap in the outside months is set at 4,000. So if your winter quarter average is 2,500, we'll go through some examples, and you use 2,800 in April, you're paying that additional 300 gallons. You're not capped in that scenario until you hit 4,000. So you can pay from anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000. You use 5,000 gallons in winter average. That's your cap, and you're capped at that. So really, the way I looked at it, the easiest way to explain it is we have two caps: 4,000 or your winter. I already mentioned about the commercial customers. So this is the example for like the gentleman who came in and presented to us a few months ago. For people who use around 2,500 gallons in their winter quarter. So this is an example where the winter average would be 2,400 gallons. But outside of those months, this customer would be paying up to 4,000. And your cap doesn't come in until that 4,000 gallons. There's a reason for that. It took a little digging and reading to understand why this was done. This is really to account for about 1% of our customers who don't live here during winter months. We do have people who are snowbirds who don't live in the city during the winter average where you have a use of 0. And it was really a way to make sure that we're accounting for those residents and those customers. That was the reason that we had the 4,000. 4,000 at the time was calculated based on average usage. We talked about that a little bit in our last meeting. 2.1 person household times average use per person gets you around 3,900 gallons. You'll see some data today that our average use by customer is less than that. So for a residential customer whose winter average is above 4,000 gallons, this example in that same period is 4,600 gallons. They're capped at that throughout the year. So if they use less than 4,600, they pay whatever they use, but they never pay more than 4,600 gallons. That's typically what you see in a true winter quarter cap. You actually are capped at your use. So just, again, this is just data to kind of help the discussion. When we look at our number of accounts, we have about 24,000 single-family residential accounts, about 3,500 commercial, and then 172 industrial. When you look at the actual usage, though, on flows, 74% of our flows are coming in from our commercial and multifamily buildings, and our single-family residential homes are really representing about 22% of our flows or our income. So when we think about income, it's about a quarter of our flows. We're talking about a quarter of our billed flows in tonight's discussion for setting these caps. But the industrial rounds it out by another 3%. So we took data, most recent data we got from Virginia American Water from 2018. Showing what usage looks like. So in the Y column, we have number of residential accounts, and then we have water usage in kgal. So 0, 1,000, 2,000, all the way up to 20,000 gallons of use per month. And we try to classify, see where our customers, how many customers were using our, based on usage. So how many customers do we have using 3, 4, 5, 6 kgals? You really see 1,000 to about 6,000 is making up the majority of our accounts. If you look at less than 4,000, you're about 3/4 of usage, people using less than 4,000 kgals per month when you do the math and add up those accounts. And we did it 2 ways. We looked at the entire year, so they're the dark blue columns. And then we also looked at just the winter quarter average to see if there was a change, if there are any trends, if we just look at the winter quarter average. And it seemed like the more water you use, the higher the use was in the winter quarter average over the yearly average. The left, or you go to the left on the x-axis, you're seeing the average usage throughout the year be a little bit higher. It's all in rounding these numbers too. So there's not really a big delta necessarily when you look at it. So we didn't really see a trend with winter average versus taking average throughout the year. So we looked at another, and my apologies on the colors here because they can be confusing. We'll start with just what the graph's showing. So this is our average and median residential water usage throughout the year for our customers. Blue is the average. Purple is the median. There's 1 month when you look at the median where we're above 3,000 kgals, it's 4,000. So really the median's around 3,100 kgals for the median month over month. We have that 1 month in September where it's around 4,000. So then when you look at the average usage for residential customers throughout the annual year, the whole year, 4,290. Some municipalities do a 6-month winter quarter average. So we looked at that. That average would be 3,970. And then the winter quarter average for our customers is around 4,000 gallons, which supports the current policy. Median, if you go back 1 slide, Lorna, that average gets thrown because we have such a long tail. So that's why we looked at the median. So when we looked at that long tail, we do have some customers using up to 20,000 gallons a month 2% 9, 1% 10. So that's the reason we went back and looked at the median. So if we went back today and tried to set a cap, an artificial cap to replace 4,000, it would probably be the median of around 3,000 and 30,000, which you'll see referenced in the options that we're going to present moving forward. Okay, I'll stop there for a second.
Any questions at this point?
No? Okay. So really, again, the easiest way to explain our current policy, option one is to maintain what we currently have. Have two caps, one at the true winter average for those using more than 4,000, and then the one at 4,000 like we have currently for those using less during the winter quarter. Right now we bill for new customers. One thing we got to think about when new customers come online, if they don't have a winter average, what do you do? We can bill based on the water usage with a max bill of 4,000 gallons per month is what we currently do. So right now, if you're a new customer, you're only going to get billed 4,000 gallons per month if you don't have a winter quarter established. Option two is just keep the same approach as what we're currently doing and just adjust the cap from 4,000 down to 3,000 or 3,500, which was supported on the data on the last slide to more reflect what actual water usage is in Alexandria from our residential customers. In addition to that, we proposed two things. So we did a little research for other municipalities across the country. There's a place in Texas, I forget the exact name, Grand Prairie, Texas. We came across a policy that we really like there where, you know, they have people that might not use water during that winter average. So what they have done is to qualify for the winter quarter average policies, you have to have a minimum usage of 1,000 gallons per month in December through February. And if you have a zero read in any of those months, you wouldn't qualify for the winter quarter average and you pay whatever you use throughout the year. We like that idea, so we proposed it in here to adjust our current policy and enhance it to address some of the issues that we have in Alexandria, knowing that we have meter reads that are zero for 3 months straight. For new residential customers, we propose billing on what is actually used up to 12,000 gallons per month. And when we went back and Terry and Diana ran this through the rate model with the cap at 3,000 and the cap at 5,000 at 3,500, we saw a $40,000 increase in revenue and a $160,000 increase in revenue respectively. And revenue we just took revenue, billed revenue from last year. It's like 54 million and change. So it's about 0.1% and 0.3%. So relatively negligible for most of these options.
Can you explain how lowering the cap would result in increased revenue?
It's the reason we're seeing an increase in revenue is because we're saying that you need to qualify by using that 1,000 gallons. And we're seeing an increase in revenue because of those two bullets, the minimum usage of 1,000 and also the zero read in any month. I had the exact same question when Diana sent the results over. I'm like, what? It makes sense. So the next option is just no arbitrary cap, no 4,000, no 3,000, no 3,500. Eliminate the caps and set caps based on the actual usage, like the second option we showed in the beginning of the presentation for people who currently use over 4,000 gallons per month in that same period. Same idea for eligibility. And same idea for billing if you don't have a winter average cap established. And here we see a decrease of $110,000 in revenue. But if we look at putting a factor on that, so we, discussions, we talked about this, just bounce around ideas. People have increased flows maybe during the winter time. Some people might have decreased flows and then kids come home from the college. So maybe you look at putting a factor on it. Maybe you say it's your cap times 1.1 or your cap times 1.2. And this really just gave us a band to understand how sensitive these numbers really were. If you put a 1.2 or increase flow by 20%, say that's the cap, you'd actually see an increase in revenue by 3%. So really, really tiny changes can have some impact on our revenue. So no factor on this, we see a decrease in revenue, very, very small. But if we apply a 10%, 5% factor, probably gets us to 3%. Because people likely do use people are using more water potentially during the summer. They might have visitors. You also might have, again, I think the biggest one we came up with is kids coming home from college is a good example of more usage in the summer months than winter months, potentially. So again, it just gave us a better idea to see how sensitive these policy decisions really are. And it's within the realm of common. This is pretty much, option 3 is pretty much the norm of what most municipalities would do, setting the cap. Aaron and I were talking about this earlier today. Fairfax is a good example of setting a cap based on usage. But again, really negligible change in revenue. Option 4 was an idea, we talked about with Terry way back at the first, before the last board meeting when a gentleman came in with the ideas, the comments. The idea is the same as option 3, but instead of using an average across that period, it's going with a peak. You take your peak usage of December, January, February, and that sets your cap for that 3-month period for the rest of the year. Single family residential, the only change with eligibility is we wouldn't have that $1,000 any longer, 1,000 gallons of usage any longer. Anybody with a 0 read in this option would be capped at 3,000 or 4,000. So if you're away for those 3 months during the winter, you get capped at 3 or 4. And we ran the numbers for both to see what that did to revenue. Same idea for new residential customers. And when you look at this one, if you do the peak idea, 0 reads capped at 3,000, it's about $210,000 increase in revenue. And capping at 4,000 is a $240,000 increase in revenue.
All right, second episode is starting, so we're getting the theme song again.
And then we just looked at an option, if we eliminated it completely, no cap whatsoever, bill based on usage. And that would have a change, a 3.6% increase in revenue or $2 million. So those were the options that we kind of ran through. I think the most common that you'll see across the industry is option 3. What they did in Grand Prairie was a really unique way of dealing with the 0 reads. And that's the reason you see us be able to retain revenue and not have a big loss in revenue. So next steps is just to review the proposed options, have a discussion at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting in February. And then our goal would be to implement these as part of fiscal year 2025 budget cycle, so they take effect. Changes would take effect on July 1, 2024. And we did talk to, so Mr. Jinks had sent over a question about this. Over the years, the city previously had no cap for their sanitary sewer fee, which is a pass-through in the AlexRenew bill. About 2 years ago, it got changed to align with the AlexRenew cap of 4,000 or greater, or average, whichever is greater. And what would have to happen with the city is they would run their own numbers as well, like we did. And they'd likely have to have a code change and then take it back to council before these would go into effect. So that has to be accommodated between now and July if we make any changes.
Is it correct? Basically, while we get positive and negative revenue impacts on all of these, that in effect, there's no real positive negative impact because it all goes into our total setting of the rate. And it just means it adds that much more to other people's bills or takes that much away.
Fractions of cents, yes. I think that's why we wanted to present this before we went through the rate model and rate setting process next month, so that it's fresh in everybody's head.
Could you leave the 6 options up for just a minute? I'd like to hear from, I guess, Matt's team. How confused are our ratepayers about the winter average?
I would say fairly confused.
Fairly confused.
I think it's a pretty complicated thing to explain at the moment.
They just, by fairly confused, you mean they just don't understand it?
Yes. I mean, I don't think it's driving like a huge amount of call volume, but I don't think a ton of people understand it.
Probably so complicated, they can't really come up with an clear enough understanding in their mind, to know whether they're for it or against it.
And I think you'll probably have the same reaction to this, that no matter what you pick, people are gonna go, huh?
Well, I will say, though, that option 3 of all of them is the easiest. Well, maybe option 2, but option 3 is the easiest to understand. I think 6 is probably unrealistic.
And
Five?
One on the right.
The 5, yeah.
Like, is there another one?
No, I just, my eyes are
Six
not.
doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not real.
The eyes aren't working. Yeah. So something to think about.
The revenue differences are really pretty insignificant, aren't they?
Yes, except for the option 5.
Sure.
Given that, it seems like we should try to just pick the approach that's the most fair. You know, if it's not going to make a huge difference to the revenue, then we might as well just pick the one that is most fair for the customer. Especially since, did you say that fewer like 1% of accounts like are leaving for the winter?
Yeah, about 1% are complete 0 meter read.
Yeah, that's
But if
such
you
a
go-
tiny fraction. What, you know, why are we designing a whole policy to accommodate for such a tiny fraction of accounts? It seems like, in a way that is currently, I think, working against the people who live here year round, the Denny's Love Water.
And I'm just, my gut reaction is either 3 or 4 seem the fairest.
I actually think there's some differences between 3 and 4, and I'd actually like to see. In my mind, I was thinking there's actually a kind of a hybrid between 3 and 4 that I'd be curious to know what the numbers were. So for 3, it would be everyone gets billed for their winter quarter average unless they're ineligible, in which case they're billed based on usage. But it seems like another option would be for the accounts that are ineligible to bill them based on a cap, which is the cap still exists in option 4, but it's highest month instead of average. So there's like, there's a way to kind of combine elements of 3 and 4 in a way that I think might even make. Well, what do you all think about the merits of using that quarterly average versus the highest usage in 1 month in that time period? Does one seem more fair or defensible?
I talked myself out of 4, and I don't know if Terry's on the phone. His hand's up. He wants to say something. I'll go real quick, and Terry, you can kind of talk to this. But before we had that board meeting, the night the gentleman had the comments on it, we talked about it, and he's like, he loved the peak idea. And I'm like, I thought about it, and I'm like, well, what if you have a family and like it's like Home Alone, and like everybody comes to your house during the holiday, and you have like this big usage because you had a bunch of people there that month, then you're penalized and you're not getting the benefit of your actual usage because you had a big family member there for the family event. So that kind of turned me off to the peak idea, but I'll let Terry, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hey, everyone. So I did really like that option that, Justin had proposed, with item number 4. I am sort of sympathetic to the comment Justin made, but the reason why I raised my hand was just as kind of a reminder that, to some degree, this affects also the city's charges, and that the city only recently got caught up to AlexRenew over the last year or two with the implementation of the billing cap on their portion of the fee, because prior to that, they were billing 100% of the metered water use. So I just thought that it might be worthwhile to kind of remind everyone about that particular point. And then, I think that, you have a few good options here. I mean, I did really like Justin's idea with the cap month. I will say this about these billing caps is I think that there needs to be a philosophy underlying to what your objective is. If your goal is to try to cap, because some utilities might want to set the billing cap, not just necessarily perfectly match indoor use because it's an estimate, but they just want to capture all of the build flows that might have been generated from indoor use. So they might set the cap higher. And we sometimes see that in the utility industry where it's set higher because you just don't want to understate the amount of build flows in the system that might be getting returned by the customers. And then you have others that are trying to measure it a bit more precisely. I think that, here it seems to me that you guys are trying to get something that's equitable to the customers and address some of the concerns with folks that are being water conscious, and like to maybe utilize some water for outdoor and don't want to be charged for that. So I think you've got some good options, and so I think it's really up to you. But yeah, when Justin originally proposed it, I thought it was a great idea. So, but do agree with his point about being sympathetic to, having a lot of people in at one point, potentially raising your cap, unfortunately.
I could also see it going the other way for like folks who, leave town for the holidays in December. So December would be lower than January and February. So anyway, so for 3 and 4, there's kind of 2 differences, like major differences between 3 and 4. One is like quarterly average versus peak month within the quarter. And then the other is what happens to the people who are ineligible. One bills them based on usage and one bills them using a cap. And you can kind of mix and match both of those. So that's why I was curious on about your take on my previous question, but then also on the second one. I mean, is it fair to bill people based on summer usage? Or would it be helpful to have a cap for the few accounts that are not eligible for the winter usage? That's just the question that I have.
Yeah, you could slide the second row on 4 over to 3, and we could see how that would play out. It just, instead of you're not allowed, well, you're just capped at one of these amounts, which is not a far cry from where we currently stand either. So it's not a big change to our policy. You still get to participate. You're just capped at that historic 3,000 or 4,000 gallon per month rate.
I mean, it seems like current policy is based on the assumption that it isn't fair to bill someone based on their summer water usage in the summer.
Yeah, I think the current policy was set up because we wanted to, as Terry mentioned, make sure we're reflective about the bill flows coming to AlexRenew. And if you're watering your garden, that water's not coming to AlexRenew. So either you put in another meter for your irrigation system, or we set up kind of a policy like this to make sure that we're accounting for those flows.
My recollections of the debates over the last couple of decades were precisely that was the reason.
So yeah, seeing that brought back into this option gave me a bit of pause. But it seemed like you just said, you could take the second block and kind of substitute it in to column 3.
Correct.
And I mean, from a policy perspective, that seems to be sensible, seems to make sense. But we want to see the numbers just to make sure. Something weird.
So, Mr. Carr, can you all run those numbers and maybe have them for the committee meeting in February?
So just to be clear, we're gonna take the eligibility requirements of 4 and bring it over to 3. And get rid of the Grand Prairie, Texas idea of doing the non-eligibility piece. So if you have no usage, you're capped at 3,000 and 4,000.
And we believe the zero usage is a very small number of folks.
So it's 1% when we looked at the data. 0 to 1,000 is 5%. 0 is 1%.
200-ish.
You have to go back to that slide.
Okay. 270?
Yes, 1%.
Good, good.
Thank you for presenting all the options so clearly.
Very well presented. Also, a fair amount of number crunching too.
Yeah.
See. This is our team, or Terry and company.
That's number crunching, Terry and Diana.
Very good.
Very nice, thank you.
Spreadsheet's a beast.
I can
Only
imagine. I can imagine. I can imagine. Row for every rating. Amazing what you can do with Excel.
Possible to have some in-depth conversations with the city and see if they can't have some internal discussions. So by February, we can get an idea of whether or not they'd say, yeah, they would generally go along because it would have to be an ordinance change. So there's some lead time with that, and they'd have to sell it to finance folks and to the manager's office. Which I don't see a big problem here, but it's just steps in the process. And it's not a crisis, so sometimes those things take longer to get through. So if we want to incorporate this into our rates, I think getting them fully underway in consideration would help us in the end.
Very fine work. Very fine work. Okay, so the committee meeting is the 12th of February. Okay. Mr. Jenks, I suspect you're going to have a well-attended committee.
Good.
Okay, moving right into disconnection for non-payment. Mr. Carl, do you want to walk through that? Or just walk through the talking points?
Sure. So I'll let Mr. Robertson kind of walk through the talking points. High level overview is that we have a standard operating process that we've dusted off since the last time disconnects were done. It's really governed by 3 bullets at the top of that page: rates, rules, and regulations, our code. What's the other one, Matt?
AlexRenew.
AlexRenew, VAW. So Mr. Robertson has been working on the procedure for the last 6 months, and it's pretty much summarized here. So based on that, we kind of just wanted to walk through what the process would look like and the timing for disconnections. The good news is our initial goal funding for our LEAP program has been met. So as soon as we're ready to disperse funds, Dollar Energy will. 15,000 was our initial goal. So that doesn't even count some of the things that are rolling in. So we've got funding in place, at least to help those in need that qualify, so they're not getting disconnected when this process starts. So we're well ahead of the curve with the LEAP program, and hopefully we can get some more funds in there between now and the the time we actually start shut-offs.
So if you look at the top of the talking points, you can see the policies that guide our process here. Mr. Carl referred to. As he sort of noted too, disconnections have been suspended essentially since COVID, so March of 2020, as most utilities at the time suspended disconnections. We are, I would say, a bit behind in a sense because most of the local wastewater and wastewater utilities have already begun disconnections for at least a year, sometimes more. So you can see our current delinquencies here, as well as the number of, they're all 60 days. The number of customers that we currently have on payment plans is the last bullet here. So we have 115 currently on payment plans from the residential side, and then 13 from the commercial accounts. We're currently communicating about our payment plans in a number of ways. In February, there'll be an insert advertising those to all the customers as well. So just to kind of get the word out. Anybody that's on a payment plan will also avoid interruption of service. So that's a positive as well, in addition to our LEAP funding. So they have a number of ways they can kind of catch up or stay current. So if you look, our process itself aligns with these policies at the top of the page. And then the bullets below that sort of walk through that process. The way it works is when a customer becomes past due, they receive a notice on their bill. They also get a robocall. Shortly thereafter, they'll receive a first notice in the mail. And then after that, a second notice that's certified so that we can track it. So that we know that they're receiving some sort of notification that they are past due. And then if none of those are responded to, then we'll contact Virginia American Water to begin the process. It's also probably worth noting at this point that almost every customer has received a lot of notices that they're past due because they're getting one on their bill every month. We have not done robocalls with GCWW. We will implement that with the new system. It's also worth noting, just to sort of catch everyone up. And then Virginia American Water disconnects Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4. They'll, as I understand it, reconnect at the same time period, but also on a needed basis Fridays as well. So that's sort of why they stopped disconnecting on Thursdays.
Do they charge for disconnections or for reconnections?
Yeah, so there's a flat fee for both.
You know how much that is?
It's $25 for each disconnect and reconnect, which is why we charge a fee, just to basically reimburse their charges.
How do you think this is going to play out with an individual customer? I mean, it sounds like folks are not responding to door hangers, to notices on their bills.
Yeah.
Are they going to respond to a robocall? Are they going to respond to a certified letter? Or is it going to be when the water stops?
Typically, the way I've seen it in the past is leading up to disconnection process, we will communicate every which way. That will get a certain percentage of people to pay their bill, get on a payment plan, go after LEAP distributions to stay online. That'll work to a certain extent. When we start disconnecting people, typically you don't have to disconnect that many folks, and sort of the word of mouth spreads. I think it'll end up on Nextdoor. I think people share within the same community. And I think that really gets people paying their bill. That's what I've seen in the past personally. I would ask if Lake saw the same thing. I think.
No, same trend. The biggest impact comes when the actual disconnect happens. All efforts leading to that will generate, will turn some bills around, but usually the low hanging fruit, usually a single percentage, 2-3%, whatever the number is. The biggest impact comes once the actual disconnect starts.
And as I'm reading here, we're starting with the most severe cases of delinquency.
That's correct.
I mean, these are a year delinquent, 2 years.
Oh, yeah, multiple years at this point.
Any questions?
Yeah, I would suggest we change June to July. making changes that might surprise the public. Is generally in local government administration, you do not put surprises out there when there are elections going on.
Yeah, I think that's.
So I think starting July, which is the beginning of our fiscal year, we can go through, I think, and talk about the policies, say we're going to do it. I think that'll go fine, but nobody will pay attention to it until somebody gets a phone call saying, no, my water's been disconnected, and then facts don't matter.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I think that if we did it in July, it'll be okay, fine, proceed, or it'll be minor rumblings rather than a blow up on us.
This is an illustration of the orange strengths we were talking about. Highly valuable. I'm glad you caught that.
I can show you my scars from having to learn that, so.
When you send the letters out, do you also include a notification that if they don't pay by a certain date, you can disconnect?
Yes, and the letters will get progressively more. Yes, so we're building this, so a lot of the steps of this have already been built into the customer service process as well. So they've programmed a lot of these steps and we can implement fairly quickly.
So do the letters and other communications that lead up to disconnection refer the customer to LEAP with the eligibility requirements?
They
Because
will.
that seems important.
For sure, they will. So we didn't have LEAP the last year,
Right,
so.
so I guess will they
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the right tense. Yeah.
So we did refer them to payment plans in every communication. So we'll continue to do that and
Yeah, we wanted to get that set up before this started so that people who are eligible could get assistance instead of being shut off. Good.
it's a great tool for them.
And Mr. Carl, this also should probably be in the briefing for when we meet with council. Just not a lot of detail, but just we're doing that. Good.
And I would explicitly say, and if you're going to provide this to council, I would include LEAP.
Oh, yeah.
In this document, just so it's, is it?
I would almost start off.
Exemptions.
No, it's not in here currently.
Did I miss it?
Well,
The payment plan is mentioned.
yeah, I wouldn't, it would, that would be more of a notification.
Yeah, just make clear to council or anyone else that we're doing this to make sure that people who can't afford to pay and need aren't like being unduly punished with disconnection.
And I would move this to a higher level than explanation. Or
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We'll be getting in the weeds of why not 65 days.
Oh, yeah,
You know, and it's like,
So the outline for the deck currently goes through, for council board work, or goes through LEAP. We also are talking to SAG about LEAP, so we'll bring this in as a slide.
Yeah, I would start the story about LEAP.
Correct.
And then close with this. Yeah. And again, much higher level.
and underscoring that we're the last utility to actually do this. Everybody else is going back to doing it. So we put a program in place, and maybe this is also a way of saying, but we're not sure we have enough money. Which I think we will run out of money, but at least it gets a little, we don't think it's going to be the panacea. It's going to be more demand and we probably will be able to meet, and that says it in front of the folks who may be looking to help fill the coffer.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. Any other questions about disconnection? Jump right into the final item on the agenda, which are the outcome reports. Mr. Carr. Thing you want to bring to our attention?
So going through the monthly report, you'll see an increase in delinquencies. That's a self-induced wound, or some of our billing has gone out late, so it's being reflected now in December as opposed to November, October. That's due to our billing transition. Some customers had not received a bill, or bills had gone out late. So we're working through that with our vendor now to get the billing back on track. I mentioned the goal for LEAP has been reached. Today, Senate Bill 372 was reported unanimously to the Senate Appropriations Committee. by the Senate Ag and Natural Resources Committee. So Unit Ag reviewed, Senator Evans presented to Ag today. They all voted yes, yay, to move it forward to Senate Appropriations. After that, it'll go to Senate floor. So good news about our bill for extending the deadline. I forget the House bill number off the top of my head. Is it 71? That hasn't gone yet to any committees or subcommittees. There's a couple meetings coming up. January 18th, next week, we've got our last stakeholder meeting with our current SAG before it becomes a board group. That will be then in March, and we're also meeting the following week with Council Board Work Group. The decks will look very similar. We'll talk about LEAP, and we'll bring the disconnection piece in as well, and we'll also add in the bit about winter quarter average for Council Board Work. And then the last page of the AlexRenew dashboard, just highlighting that really cool picture of our pumping shaft liner is complete. So we can start building out the pumping station.
We want to do anything special for the SAG group, if this is their last meeting coming up on Thursday.
Their last meeting is constituted under the council. It's the same members moving forward.
Oh, okay.
Yvonne left. Larry Bean took over Yvonne's spot. We gave Yvonne a tooth from Hazel. He was pretty psyched. And a t-shirt family.
The broken tooth.
It was a well-used tooth. There's no carbide left on it.
Hansel is within,
Couple thousand, less than a couple thousand feet.
yeah, just almost within 1,000 feet. Right? So going about 40 feet a day. Okay.
Yeah, tough navigating that big curve with the belt, but yeah, it's been give us some issues, but we're still moving forward. The conveyor belt, hard to make curves like that. Keep the conveyor
Yeah.
straight and not stretched.
Just,
The biggest challenge right now is the belt. Hazel's fine.
construction going on in Pendleton is fascinating.
It's a good point. We did send out some talking points about work at Pendleton. That will be in the council board work group presentation as well.
Yeah.
We did receive one phone call about the 4 trees that were taken down. They were invasive species, so whatever I give it, we talked to today for about half an hour. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. But still moving forward, and we're going to bump out into a little bit into North Union Street and Pendleton Street, and we're going to take over that boardwalk. That was always planned. Just, we didn't occupy it right away just to minimize impacts on the community.
Is that when we pull out the TBM? Is that why we need this?
We need that space so we can connect into the outfall. So it's building the structure back to the outfall, connecting and restoring it.
Or I have my cup of tea and watch construction.
We'll put up a. we'll put
By
up
the
a
way, I'm the
temporary-
only one who uses it, so. Any other questions on the updates or outcome?
Can we see the line that they were calling?
I'm all set.
Okay. Any other discussion? The motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Your second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
My daughter, wonderful.
So you missed that.
What's your intent?
Her name's Caroline.
I torched your unsuspecting.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not so tired.
Yes, torch.
It was clearly.
You were torched.
She's watching Crime Scene.
Oh,
There's funny.
The new one. There's a new one.
Meandering on and on about.
my kids lived on.
No
Watched the, yeah, I watched the
Magic
old.
School Bus, Ace Blue, all that stuff. Reading Rainbow.
Yeah, my husband had to fly to Phoenix unexpectedly on Sunday because his father is. So, he can't win. No, but it's for his parents.
No win.